Dad, please let us in. My voice barely rose above the howl of the blizzard. Snow clung to my army uniform, freezing into the fabric as I held my trembling 1-year-old daughter against my chest. My little Lily buried her face in my shoulder, too cold to cry anymore. Behind us, the wind erased our footprints almost as quickly as we made them. My father opened the front door. His eyes went first to Lily's tiny blue fingers, then to the rows of ribbons on my uniform, finally to the 2 trash bags sitting beside my boots. "What happened?" he asked quietly. I swallowed hard. He brought his mistress home. Dad's jaw tightened, and his mother packed our bags, changed the locks, and left us outside. For a long moment he said nothing. Then he reached for the keys hanging beside the door. They just declared war on the wrong family. That was the moment everything changed. 6 hours earlier, I had stepped off a military transport after spending 6 exhausting months overseas. Every day of that deployment, I counted down until I could finally surprise my husband, Ryan, and hold Lily in my own arms again. The flight home felt endless, but every mile brought me closer to the life I thought was waiting for me. Ryan had insisted I leave Lily with him while I was deployed. His mother, Patricia, constantly assured me they would keep everything under control. I believed them. After all, Ryan was my husband. Patricia was Lily's grandmother. Family was supposed to protect one another. When my taxi pulled into our neighborhood, heavy snow had already begun falling. Christmas lights glowed warmly from nearby homes. Children laughed while building snowmen across the street. For a brief moment, everything looked exactly as I had imagined during those lonely nights overseas. Then I noticed a silver SUV parked in my driveway. I didn't recognize it. I carried my duffel bag to the porch, balancing Lily's favorite stuffed rabbit under one arm. I'd bought it overseas and planned to surprise her with it after putting her to bed. I unlocked the front door. It wouldn't open. Confused, I tried again. Nothing. The deadbolt had been changed. Before I could knock, the front door swung open. Ryan stood there. He wasn't smiling. He wasn't surprised. He looked annoyed. "You're early," he said flatly. Before I could answer, a woman wearing my robe walked into the hallway behind him. She held my coffee mug. She looked around my home as though she belonged there. Ryan didn't even try to hide her. "This is Vanessa," he said. My heart seemed to stop. Patricia stepped into the hallway beside them. "Oh, good," she said cheerfully. "You're finally here." She pointed toward 2 black trash bags sitting on the porch. "We packed everything we thought you'd need." I stared at her, unable to breathe. "My deployment ended today," I whispered. Ryan folded his arms. "And our marriage ended months ago." I looked from him to Vanessa, then back to Patricia. "What about Lily?" Ryan shrugged. "You can take her." Patricia reached behind the door and tossed a diaper bag onto the porch. The zipper broke when it hit the ground. Baby clothes scattered across the snow. Vanessa looked away. Ryan didn't. Patricia calmly closed the door. A second later, I heard the deadbolt click. I stood there in the freezing wind, surrounded by my daughter's clothes, my military duffel, and 2 garbage bags containing what was left of my marriage. I picked Lily up with shaking hands. There was only one place left to go. Home. Dad didn't say another word as he helped me carry the trash bags inside. The warmth of the old farmhouse wrapped around Lily almost immediately. My father laid another log on the fireplace while I knelt beside the couch, peeling off my daughter's wet little boots and socks. Her tiny feet were ice cold. "Blankets," Dad muttered. Before I could move, he disappeared down the hallway and returned with the thick quilt my mother had sewn years before she passed away. He wrapped Lily, carefully tucking the blanket around her as though she were made of glass. Only then did he look at me. "You need to get out of that uniform." I glanced down. Snow still clung to my sleeves. My ribbons and nameplate were streaked with melting ice. I had worn this uniform through mortar attacks, endless patrols, and 6 lonely months halfway around the world. Yet somehow, standing on my father's living room rug, I had never felt more defeated. 20 minutes later, Lily had finally fallen asleep in the guest bedroom. Dad poured 2 cups of black coffee and sat across from me at the kitchen table. Neither of us spoke for nearly a minute. Finally, he broke the silence. "Start from the beginning." So I did. I told him about the strange phone calls Ryan kept ending early during my deployment, the missed video chats, the excuses, how Patricia always insisted Ryan was too busy whenever I asked why he wasn't answering. I admitted something I had never wanted to say out loud. I thought it was stress. Dad slowly shook his head. "You wanted to believe your husband." "I did." "You weren't weak." His voice was calm. "You trusted someone who promised to protect you." That simple sentence almost broke me. For months I had blamed myself. Maybe I had spent too much time serving overseas. Maybe Ryan felt lonely. Maybe I had somehow failed my family. Dad leaned forward. "Emily," I looked up. "Did you cheat on your husband?" "No." "Did you abandon your daughter?" "No." "Why were you overseas?" "I was serving my country." He nodded once. "Then stop apologizing for doing something honorable." Tears rolled down my cheeks before I could stop them. Dad reached across the table and squeezed my hand. "You survived a war zone." His eyes hardened. "But what happened tonight wasn't your fault." The grandfather clock chimed midnight. Outside, the storm continued to bury the ranch beneath fresh snow. Inside, Dad quietly opened an old notebook. "I've learned something in 70 years. I recognized that notebook. He used it for everything important. Livestock records, home repairs, family emergencies. What are you doing? Making a list. A list. Facts. He wrote Ryan's name, then Patricia's, then the date. They threw you out. He wrote it down. They changed the locks. Another note. They packed your belongings. Another. They abandoned a 1-year-old child in a blizzard." His pen stopped. He looked directly into my eyes. "Courts care about facts, not anger, not revenge. Facts." I took a deep breath. "You think I should call a lawyer?" Dad smiled faintly. "I think we call Susan Walker." The name immediately sounded familiar. Susan had grown up 2 farms away. She and Dad had been friends for decades before she became one of the most respected family attorneys in the county. "I don't even know if she'll remember me." Dad actually laughed. "Emily, she came to your high school graduation." He stood and reached for the phone hanging beside the pantry. "It'll be late." "So." He dialed anyway. Susan answered on the 3rd ring. I could only hear Dad's side of the conversation. "Susan, it's Jack Dawson." A pause. "I need your help." Another pause. "My daughter just came home from military deployment." Dad's expression grew grim. "Her husband moved another woman into her house." Silence. Then Dad added one final sentence. "They locked my granddaughter outside in a blizzard." He listened for several seconds before hanging up. "Well?" I asked. Susan's response was immediate. "I'll be there at 8 tomorrow morning." Dad finally allowed himself a small smile. "They think tonight was the end of your story." He looked toward the hallway where Lily was sleeping peacefully. "They're about to find out it's only the beginning." Susan Walker arrived at exactly 8 o'clock the next morning. That didn't surprise my father. "She was never late a day in her life," he said as he opened the front door. Susan stepped inside carrying a leather briefcase that looked older than I was. In her early 60s, she had silver hair pulled neatly into a bun and the calm confidence of someone who had spent decades settling family disputes without raising her voice. She hugged my father first. Then she turned to me. "Welcome home, Captain Dawson." I smiled weakly. "I wish it were under better circumstances." "So do I." She set her briefcase on the dining room table. "But wishing doesn't win cases." Her eyes swept across the 2 black trash bags still sitting near the fireplace. "They actually packed your belongings into garbage bags." I nodded. "They left me and Lily outside in the storm." Susan didn't respond immediately. Instead, she quietly wrote something in a yellow legal pad. "What are you writing?" The first impression a jury would have. That caught my attention. She looked up. "People don't remember every document. They remember images. A decorated army officer. A 1-year-old child. A blizzard. 2 garbage bags." She closed her notebook. "Those images matter." For the next 2 hours, Susan asked questions with remarkable patience. Every date, every bank account, every property document, every phone call Ryan had ignored, every strange conversation with Patricia before my deployment. Then she asked something I hadn't expected. "When was the last time you logged into your joint bank account?" I frowned. "Before I deployed." She slid her laptop toward me. "Let's check." I entered my password. The balance appeared on the screen. My stomach dropped. Almost $40,000 was gone. "What?" My voice disappeared. Susan leaned closer. "Do you recognize these transfers?" I shook my head. There were dozens of withdrawals, large electronic payments, cash advances, wire transfers. Some had been made just days after I left for deployment. Others were only weeks old. Dad slowly removed his reading glasses. He emptied the account. Susan wasn't ready to reach that conclusion. "Maybe. But we'll prove it before we accuse him." She clicked through another page. Then another. Then another. A pattern emerged. Money had been transferred into a business account I had never seen before. The account holder's name wasn't Ryan. It belonged to Patricia. Dad let out a long breath. Susan raised a hand. Not yet. She printed every page. We document. We don't speculate. I admired that. Military training had taught me the same lesson. Facts first. Emotions later. Before we could continue, my phone buzzed. The screen showed an unfamiliar number. I answered cautiously. Hello, a hesitant female voice replied. Emily. Yes, my name is Karen. I live across the street from your house. I remembered her. She often waved whenever I mowed the lawn before deployment. I need to tell you something. Her voice trembled. Ryan told everyone you abandoned him. I closed my eyes. He said you chose your military career over your family. My heart sank. Karen continued. Patricia told the whole neighborhood that Lily cried every night because her mother didn't love her. Dad clenched his fists beneath the table. Karen's voice cracked. I'm so sorry. We believed them. But after what happened yesterday, she paused. We saw everything. Saw what? You standing outside in the snow. With your little girl. Patricia locked the door. Several neighbors witnessed it. Susan immediately reached for another legal pad. Karen, she said gently after I placed the call on speaker, would you be willing to write down exactly what you saw? There was no hesitation. Absolutely. After the call ended, the room fell silent. Dad looked toward the guest bedroom where Lily was still sleeping. Ryan lied to everyone. Susan nodded. And yesterday? She carefully stacked the printed bank records. He made the mistake of letting the truth happen in front of witnesses. For the first time since returning home, I felt something replacing despair. Not revenge, hope. The following Monday, Susan called just after breakfast. I need both of you at the county courthouse, she said. There's something I want to verify before Ryan has a chance to change anything else. Her voice carried the quiet confidence I was beginning to trust. Dad looked at me over his coffee mug. That sounds promising. An hour later, we sat across from Susan in the county recorder's office. Shelves lined the walls filled with decades of property records and legal documents. Everything smelled faintly of paper and old wood. Susan placed a thick file on the table. This house didn't appear out of thin air, she said. Every property has a history. She opened the file. Emily, when did you buy the house? 7 years ago, right after my second deployment. And where did the down payment come from? My re-enlistment bonus and the inheritance my mother left me. Dad nodded. Your mother always wanted you to own a home. Susan smiled. That's exactly what I hoped you'd say. She slid several documents toward me. Read the highlighted section. I scanned the page. The original purchase agreement listed only one person providing the down payment. Me. The amount matched my military bonus almost exactly combined with the inheritance from Mom's estate. Ryan's contribution. Just under $5,000. I stared at the number. That can't be right. Susan folded her hands. It is. I always thought we bought the house together. You bought the house, she corrected gently. Ryan helped pay some monthly expenses afterward, but the initial investment came almost entirely from you. Dad leaned back in his chair. He let you believe otherwise. Susan nodded, and that misunderstanding benefited him. She opened another folder. These are mortgage records. Every payment was listed month by month. While I had been deployed multiple times over the years, my military income had continued covering automatic mortgage payments directly from our joint account. Ryan had often claimed he was carrying the family financially. The records told a different story. He wasn't paying the mortgage, I whispered. No, Susan replied. You were. For several seconds, no one spoke. The betrayal somehow felt even deeper. It wasn't just the affair. It wasn't just being locked outside. Ryan had slowly rewritten our entire marriage until I doubted my own contributions. Susan turned another page. This gets more interesting. She pointed toward a document filed only 3 weeks earlier. Ryan had attempted to refinance the house. Fortunately, the application had been rejected. Why, I asked. Because he claimed to be the sole owner. Dad frowned. But he wasn't. Exactly. Susan tapped the denial letter. The bank requested your signature. Ryan couldn't provide it. So the refinance failed. A slow smile appeared on Dad's face. That boy isn't nearly as smart as he thinks he is. Susan laughed softly. Fortunately for us. Just then her phone buzzed. She glanced at the screen. It's an investigator I hired. She answered briefly before hanging up. Well? I asked. She found Vanessa, Ryan's mistress. My stomach tightened. What about her? Susan closed the file. She's asking questions. What kind of questions? The kind people ask when they realize they've been lied to. According to the investigator, Vanessa believed Ryan owned the house outright. She also believed he had built a successful construction business. Neither claim was true. The business was struggling under heavy debt. The house was tied up in legal uncertainty, and Ryan had conveniently forgotten to mention a wife who had been serving overseas only weeks earlier. She had no idea I asked. Apparently not. Dad shook his head. Lies always need more lies, Susan smiled. And eventually, they collapse under their own weight. As we walked toward the courthouse parking lot, I looked across the town square. Families hurried between shops carrying Christmas bags. Children laughed beside the courthouse fountain despite the cold. Only a week earlier, I thought I had lost everything. Now, piece by piece, the truth was beginning to surface. Ryan believed he had erased me from our home. He had no idea the paperwork was quietly proving the opposite. And for the first time since that terrible night, I felt something stronger than anger. I felt justice moving slowly, carefully, but unmistakably in our direction. By the end of the week, life at the ranch had settled into a rhythm. It wasn't the life I had imagined while counting the days until my deployment ended, but it was steady. Every morning, Dad made pancakes for Lily. Every afternoon, I sorted through the 2 garbage bags Patricia had so proudly left on the porch. The more I unpacked, the more I realized she hadn't simply thrown me out. She had tried to erase me. Family photographs were missing. My wedding album had disappeared. Several boxes containing military medals and deployment keepsakes had never made it into the bags. Even Lily's baby book was gone. Dad watched me quietly as I folded another stack of clothes. They wanted you to think your past didn't matter. I looked up. It does. It always will. The following Tuesday, Susan invited us to her office. Stacks of neatly organized folders covered the conference table. She smiled as we walked in. I've been busy. Dad chuckled. I figured as much. Susan handed each of us a copy of a thick folder. Across the front, she had written 3 simple words. The facts. Inside were witness statements from 6 neighbors, photographs of the changed locks, copies of the bank transfers, property records, mortgage documents, phone records, military deployment orders. Everything was arranged in chronological order. This isn't revenge, Susan said. This is evidence. I slowly turned each page. Every document reminded me that truth had a way of surviving even when people tried to bury it. Susan continued. I've also spoken with Child Protective Services. My heart skipped. What? She quickly raised a reassuring hand. They're not investigating you. They're investigating whether Lily was knowingly placed in danger. Dad's expression hardened. Good. Susan explained that leaving a 1-year-old child outside during a winter storm could become an important issue during custody proceedings. Judges pay very close attention when children's safety is involved. For the first time since that awful night, I stopped worrying that no one would believe me. The facts were beginning to speak louder than my emotions ever could. Meanwhile, life on the ranch slowly helped me breathe again. Dad insisted that staying busy was the best medicine. Together we repaired the old guest house behind the barn. Its paint was faded. The porch sagged. The roof leaked in one corner. It'll be yours, Dad said one afternoon while handing me a hammer. You don't have to stay forever, but you'll always have somewhere to come home to. His words caught me off guard. I had spent years believing home was a house Ryan and I shared. Now I understood. Home had never been a building. It was the people who opened the door without asking what you had done wrong. One Saturday morning, 2 pickup trucks pulled into the driveway. 4 men and 2 women climbed out. I recognized them immediately. They were veterans I had served with over the years. Mark, Angela, Luis, Heather. None of them had known what happened until Dad quietly reached out. Mark hugged me without saying a word. Angela knelt beside Lily, who immediately handed her a stuffed rabbit. Within an hour, they were repairing the guest house roof, replacing broken fence boards, and fixing the old porch steps. I stood in the yard overwhelmed. You guys didn't have to do this. Louise smiled. Yeah, we did. We don't leave our own behind. Those words hit me harder than I expected, because Ryan had abandoned me. But the people who had worn the same uniform never did. As the sun began to set behind the snow-covered fields, Susan's car pulled into the driveway. She stepped out holding another envelope. Dad looked at her face. Good news, she nodded. The court officially accepted our filings this afternoon. I took a deep breath. So, Susan smiled. Ryan has just been served. Hundreds of miles away, he probably believed his new life was finally beginning. He had no idea the first legal papers had just landed in his hands. And this time, he wouldn't be the one controlling the story. The courthouse looked exactly the way I remembered from jury duty years ago, quiet, orderly, and intimidating. Only this time I wasn't there as a citizen. I was there as a wife fighting for the truth. Dad parked his old pickup beneath a leafless oak tree. Before getting out, he rested one hand on my shoulder. "You faced enemy fire." I managed a nervous smile. "This is just another mission." I laughed softly. "Somehow this feels harder. Because this one involves people you loved." He was right. Combat had taught me how to recognize danger. Marriage had taught me that betrayal rarely announced itself. Inside the courthouse, Susan was already waiting. She wore her usual navy suit and carried 3 thick binders. Every tab was color-coded, every document perfectly organized. Ryan stood near the opposite wall with Patricia. He wore an expensive gray suit, but something about him looked different. Less confident. More tired. Vanessa wasn't beside him. He noticed me almost immediately. For a brief second, guilt crossed his face. Then it disappeared. Patricia whispered something into his ear. He straightened his shoulders and looked away. Susan quietly leaned toward me. "Remember, we're not here to punish." "We're here to prove." I nodded. Those words steadied me. When the bailiff called our case, everyone took their seats. The judge, a calm woman in her late 60s named Judge Eleanor Brooks, reviewed the file in silence before looking over her glasses. "This matter concerns dissolution of marriage, child custody, and financial disclosures." Her voice was firm but measured. "Let's begin." Ryan's attorney stood first. "My client regrets the breakdown of this marriage." He glanced toward me. "However, Mrs. Dawson voluntarily placed her military career ahead of her family." Dad inhaled sharply beside me. Susan gently touched his arm. "Not yet." Ryan's attorney continued. "During her repeated deployments, my client became Lily's primary caregiver." He was effectively abandoned. The courtroom fell quiet. Judge Brooks looked toward Susan. "Your response?" Susan stood calmly. "Your Honor." She placed a single sheet of paper before the judge. "I'd like to begin with Exhibit 1. The judge adjusted her glasses. Her eyebrows lifted almost immediately. "Military deployment orders. Signed. Dated. Approved months before I ever boarded the plane." Susan spoke evenly. "Captain Emily Dawson did not abandon her family. She fulfilled military orders issued by the United States Army." Ryan's attorney shifted uncomfortably. Susan continued. "Her husband fully supported this deployment before she left." She produced another document. Ryan signed family readiness paperwork. His own signature acknowledged responsibility for Lily during my deployment. Judge Brooks looked directly at Ryan. "You signed this?" Ryan hesitated. "Yes." Susan didn't pause. She placed another folder before the judge. "This contains over 200 text messages exchanged during Captain Dawson's deployment. Many included Ryan writing, 'We're proud of you. We're counting the days until you come home. Lily misses Mommy.'" Susan looked at the courtroom. These messages continued until approximately 6 weeks before Captain Dawson returned. Judge Brooks slowly turned another page. "What changed?" Susan answered quietly. "We believe another relationship began." Ryan lowered his eyes. For the first time since entering the courtroom, he had no answer. Susan wasn't finished. "Your Honor, I'd now like to call our first witness. Karen, my neighbor." She walked to the witness stand with visible nerves but unwavering determination. After taking the oath, Susan asked only one question. "Mrs. Wilson, what did you personally witness on the evening of December 23rd? Karen swallowed. "I saw Emily standing outside in the snow. She was wearing her army uniform. She was holding her baby. There were garbage bags on the porch." "And then," Karen looked directly at Ryan, "I watched Patricia lock the front door." The courtroom became completely silent. Even Ryan couldn't meet anyone's eyes. Judge Brooks slowly set down her pen. "This court," she said carefully, "takes allegations involving a child's safety very seriously." For the first time that morning, Ryan looked afraid. When court recessed for lunch, I stepped into the hallway feeling as though I had run a marathon. My hands were trembling, not from fear, from relief. For the first time since returning home, someone in authority had listened to the facts instead of assumptions. Dad handed me a bottle of water. "You did well." I barely said anything. "You didn't have to." He smiled. The truth spoke louder. Susan joined us a few moments later carrying another folder. "We're only halfway through today." "There's more," she nodded. "A lot more." Court resumed 30 minutes later. Judge Brooks returned to the bench, her expression unchanged. "Mrs. Walker," she said to Susan, "you may continue." Susan stood. "Thank you, Your Honor. I'd like to address the financial disclosures submitted by Mr. Dawson." Ryan shifted uncomfortably. His attorney glanced toward him before standing. "We've already provided all requested financial records." Susan smiled politely. "I agree. You provided records?" She lifted a different folder. "They just weren't complete." The courtroom grew quiet. Susan placed several bank statements before the judge. "Our forensic accountant reviewed every transaction from the couple's joint accounts during Captain Dawson's deployment." She turned to Ryan. "Mr. Dawson, would you explain these transfers?" Ryan looked down. "I don't remember." Susan nodded. "I expected that answer." She displayed a large chart on the courtroom monitor. Colored lines traced the movement of money over 6 months. Thousands of dollars left our joint account, then appeared in another account, then disappeared again. Judge Brooks studied the chart carefully. "Who owns this receiving account?" Susan answered calmly. "Patricia Dawson." Every head in the courtroom turned toward Ryan's mother. Patricia's face lost its color. "My son asked me to hold the money." Susan walked closer. "For what purpose?" Patricia hesitated. I don't remember." Susan's voice remained respectful. "I do." She held up printed emails obtained during discovery. "They discuss protecting the money before Captain Dawson returned from deployment." Ryan's attorney immediately stood. "Objection. Taken out of context." Judge Brooks examined the documents herself. "Overruled," Susan continued. "The total transferred was $42,680. My breath caught. It was even more than we originally believed. Susan clicked to another screen. "This account also received funds intended for Lily's college savings plan." I stared at Ryan. "You took our daughter's money." He finally looked at me. "It was temporary." "You were never supposed to know." The words escaped before he could stop them. Silence filled the courtroom. Even his own attorney slowly closed his notebook. Judge Brooks looked directly at Ryan. "Mr. Dawson, did you just admit that you intentionally concealed marital assets?" Ryan's face turned pale. I didn't mean..." "You answered the question." He lowered his head. "Yes." The judge wrote several notes. Her expression hardened. "This court takes financial dishonesty very seriously." Susan wasn't finished. "There is one final witness, Your Honor." The courtroom doors opened. Vanessa walked inside. Ryan's eyes widened. She avoided looking at him. After taking the oath, she sat quietly. Susan asked gently, "Ms. Carter? Were you aware Mr. Dawson was still legally married when you moved into the residence?" Vanessa shook her head. "No." "Were you told the house belonged solely to him?" "Yes." "Were you told Captain Dawson had abandoned her family?" "Yes." She glanced toward me with obvious regret. "I believed him." Susan nodded. "When did you realize those statements were false?" Vanessa swallowed. "The night Emily came home. I watched his mother lock them outside. I packed my things the next morning." Ryan closed his eyes. The courtroom remained silent. The affair had ended before the divorce had even begun. Judge Brooks looked over the courtroom one final time. "It appears," she said quietly, "that deception has played a significant role in this case." Ryan sat motionless. Everything he had built on lies was collapsing. One witness, one document, one truth at a time. 2 weeks later, the courtroom felt different. The tension that had filled the earlier hearings was gone. Ryan no longer walked with the confidence of a man who believed he controlled the outcome. His expensive suits had disappeared, replaced by simple clothes that hung loosely on his tired frame. Patricia looked older too. The sharp confidence she carried that snowy night had been replaced by silence. Judge Brooks entered the courtroom precisely at 9 o'clock. Everyone stood. After reviewing several final documents, she folded her hands. "This court has reached its decision." No one moved. No one even seemed to breathe. Judge Brooks looked directly at me. "Captain Emily Dawson, the evidence presented clearly establishes that you fulfilled your military obligations honorably while continuing to provide financial support for your household." She turned toward Ryan. "The court further finds that Mr. Dawson intentionally concealed marital assets, misrepresented financial information, and participated in conduct that unnecessarily endangered a minor child." Ryan slowly lowered his head. Judge Brooks continued reading. "Primary physical custody of Lily Dawson is awarded to her mother." A weight I hadn't realized I was carrying suddenly lifted from my shoulders. Dad quietly squeezed my hand beneath the table. Judge Brooks wasn't finished. "The marital residence shall be awarded to Captain Dawson." I blinked. For a moment, I wasn't sure I had heard correctly. Ryan looked up in disbelief. "The house," he whispered. Judge Brooks met his eyes. "The court finds that the home was purchased primarily with Captain Dawson's inheritance and military earnings." She turned another page. "Mr. Dawson is ordered to reimburse marital funds improperly transferred during Captain Dawson's deployment." Ryan's attorney closed his briefcase. Even he knew there was nothing left to argue. Then came something I hadn't expected. Judge Brooks looked directly at Patricia. "Mrs. Dawson, you are not a party to this divorce, but your actions contributed significantly to the events before this court." Patricia's eyes filled with tears. "I thought I was helping my son," Judge Brooks answered gently. "Helping someone commit wrongdoing is not kindness. It only delays accountability." The courtroom fell silent once again. After several final procedural matters, Judge Brooks closed the file. "This case is concluded." The bailiff announced that court was adjourned. People slowly began leaving. Ryan remained seated. His shoulders slumped. He looked nothing like the man who had stood proudly beside Vanessa only weeks earlier. As I gathered my papers, I noticed him walking toward me. Dad instinctively stepped between us. "It's okay," I whispered. Ryan stopped a few feet away. His voice cracked. "I never thought it would end like this." I looked at him calmly. "It didn't." "You ended it the night you locked your daughter outside." He closed his eyes. "I know." There was no anger left inside me, only sadness, because the man standing before me wasn't the person I had married. Maybe he hadn't been for a long time. Ryan glanced toward Lily, who was coloring quietly beside Dad. "I don't deserve another chance." "No," I answered honestly. "You don't." He nodded. "But Lily deserves a father who's willing to become a better man." Those words surprised even me. Ryan looked up. "You'd still let me see her?" "As long as you earn her trust. And keep every promise you make." He wiped his eyes. "I will." After he walked away, Dad looked at me with quiet pride. "I thought you'd be celebrating." "I am." He smiled. "No, you chose justice, not revenge." As we stepped outside into the crisp winter air, snowflakes drifted gently from the gray sky. The same season that had witnessed the worst night of my life had now witnessed something else. Not victory. Peace. Spring arrived quietly that year. The snow melted from the fields surrounding Dad's ranch, revealing fresh green grass beneath months of winter. Life slowly found its rhythm again. Lily had learned to run across the front yard without falling every few steps. Every afternoon she chased butterflies while my father followed close behind, pretending he couldn't quite catch her. Their laughter became the sound that filled the house. The court had restored ownership of my home, but I wasn't ready to move back. Not yet. Too many painful memories still lingered inside those walls. Instead, Dad and I finished renovating the little guest house behind the barn. It wasn't large. 1 bedroom, a small kitchen, a front porch overlooking open fields. But every board we replaced and every wall we painted felt like another piece of my life being rebuilt. One Saturday morning, my phone rang. The caller ID surprised me. Ryan. I stared at the screen for several seconds before answering. "Hello?" There was a long pause. "Emily." His voice sounded different, quieter. "I've been going to counseling." I didn't answer. "I know you don't owe me anything." "I know. But I wanted you to hear it from me. I've spent months trying to understand how I became the man who hurt his own family." I closed my eyes. "I hope you keep trying." "I will." Another pause. "I'd like to see Lily." "You can. But the visits stay supervised for now." "I understand." "And Ryan." "Yes. Don't make promises to impress me. Keep them for your daughter." His voice cracked. "I will." Over the next several months, something unexpected happened. Ryan actually kept showing up. Every scheduled visit, every birthday, every school activity. He arrived early. He never argued. He never blamed anyone else. Sometimes he simply sat beside Lily while she colored pictures or read children's books. He wasn't trying to win me back. He was trying to become the father she deserved. One afternoon, Dad watched them playing catch in the backyard. "I think he's changing." I nodded. "So do I." "Does that bother you?" "No." "It gives me peace." Several weeks later, another unexpected visitor arrived. Patricia. She stood on Dad's porch holding a small scrapbook. She looked older than I remembered. Not because of time, because of regret. "I don't expect forgiveness," she said quietly. "I came to return this." She handed me the scrapbook. Lily's baby book. The one I thought had disappeared forever. Inside were photographs from Lily's first birthday, her first steps, the tiny footprints taken at the hospital. Tears filled my eyes. "I should never have taken this," Patricia whispered. I convinced myself I was protecting my son. She looked toward Lily playing outside. But all I really did was hurt my granddaughter. For several moments neither of us spoke. Finally, I said the words I never imagined I would. "I forgive you." She immediately began crying. I gently raised a hand. "Forgiveness doesn't erase what happened. It simply means I'm no longer willing to let it control my future." Patricia nodded through her tears. "I understand." As she walked back to her car, Dad joined me on the porch. "You surprised me." I surprised myself. He smiled. "You know why your mother always admired you?" "Why?" "Because she said courage isn't measured by how hard you fight." He looked toward Lily, laughing in the sunshine. "It's measured by what kind of heart you have after the fighting is over." I looked at my daughter, then at the peaceful ranch that had become our refuge. For the first time in a very long while, the future felt brighter than the past. Nearly a year had passed since the blizzard that changed our lives. Winter returned, but it no longer felt cold. Not because the weather had changed, because we had. The old farmhouse was decorated for Christmas once again. Warm lights lined the porch, and the smell of cinnamon drifted from Dad's kitchen as Lily carefully hung handmade ornaments on the tree. She was almost 3 now, old enough to laugh without remembering the night she had stood shivering in my arms. For that, I thanked God every day. I had returned to active duty several months earlier, accepting an assignment close enough to home that I could spend every evening with Lily. My fellow soldiers often asked how I managed to balance military life with motherhood. I always gave the same answer. I stopped trying to do everything alone. Dad had become Lily's greatest hero. Every morning he walked her to preschool. Every afternoon he taught her little lessons around the ranch, how to feed chickens, plant tomatoes, and wave politely to every passing neighbor. He often reminded her of one simple truth. A strong person protects others, not because they have to, because they choose to. Ryan had kept every promise he made after the divorce. He never missed a scheduled visit. He continued counseling. He rebuilt trust the slow way with consistency instead of excuses. One snowy Saturday afternoon, he came to the ranch carrying a small wooden rocking horse he had built himself. "I made this for Lily." Dad examined the craftsmanship before nodding. "It's good work." Ryan smiled awkwardly. "I had a good teacher." Dad raised an eyebrow. "When was that?" Ryan looked down. "Watching you." For a long moment, neither man spoke. Then Dad extended his hand. Ryan shook it. No speeches. No dramatic apologies, just 2 men choosing respect over resentment. Later that evening, after Ryan had gone home, Lily climbed into Dad's lap. "Grandpa..." "Yes, sweetheart." "Why do you always open the door so fast?" Dad smiled. "Because one day..." He looked at me before answering. "Someone I loved needed me, and I never want anyone I love to wonder whether they're welcome." His words settled quietly into my heart. That simple act, opening a door, had become the turning point in all our lives. Looking back, I realized something I hadn't understood that terrible Christmas night. Ryan's betrayal had taken away the life I thought I wanted, but it had led me back to the people who loved me without conditions. It reminded me that real strength isn't measured by rank medals or victories. It's measured by character, by integrity, by the people who stand beside you when life falls apart. As I tucked Lily into bed that night, she wrapped her little arms around my neck. "I love you, Mommy." "I love you too, sweetheart." "And Grandpa." I smiled. "We both do." Outside, fresh snow began falling across the ranch. Inside, every light in the house glowed with warmth. I finally understood what home truly meant. It wasn't the house Ryan had tried to keep. It wasn't the furniture, the mortgage, or the front door. Home was the place where love answered before questions, where forgiveness healed what anger never could, where family wasn't defined by blood alone, but by the people who refused to let you face life's storms by yourself. If this story touched your heart, remember that even after betrayal, kindness and integrity can lead us home. If you believe family is built on love, loyalty, and second chances, please share this story with someone who needs hope today. And if you'd like to hear more heartfelt stories like this, don't forget to subscribe and join us on the next journey. The end.